It's my privilege to introduce our guest speaker for this evening. John Kolkman is the research coordinator with the Edmonton Social Planning Council. A resident of the Macaulay neighborhood for over 30 years, John and his family, almost 40 years, which is over 30 years, but John and his family have been involved with a number of community organizations, such as the Macaulay Community League and Royal Macaulay News. John is a passionate supporter of affordable, safe housing for all. He joined the Edmonton Social Planning Council in 2006 and has worked on social policy issues relating to poverty, wealth and income equality, removing employment barriers for those with low and modest incomes, social determinants of health, affordable housing, and neighborhood revitalization. John, I'm going to turn the podium over to you now. Thank you.
Just before I wanted to begin, I did want to thank Paula for inviting me to come as the guest speaker this evening. I also want to congratulate Linda Dumont and Bob McKeon, the award winners tonight. Both of them have worked tirelessly for decades, and certainly the awards that they're receiving are certainly very well deserved. So congratulations to them as well. Anyway, there's always, whenever you're doing a PowerPoint presentation, there's always those few moments when you're just not quite sure that the technology is going to cooperate. So thanks also to Mike Tully for doing the sound this evening and getting things going in terms of the presentation, which I'm calling Edmonton's Poverty Landscape. And I don't know if any of you remember the movie. There was a movie called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And I would describe my presentation tonight as the bad, the ugly, and then ending with the good, so to end on a positive note. So the first thing in terms of getting to the bad certainly is that we have way too much poverty in our community. And this is a chart looking at the proportion of persons living in poverty by family type in the Edmonton CMA. CMA standing for Edmonton Census Metropolitan Area, so it includes the city of Edmonton and the surrounding suburban communities. And as you can see, the red line over a period from 2000 to 2014, it shows you the proportion of persons by family type living in poverty. And as you can see on the left side of the chart, in 2000, we had about 40% of lone parent families living in poverty, both the adults and the children in the household. And there was a bit of improvement between 2000 and 2006 down to about 1/3, and it's pretty much flatlined since then to 2014. I should also mention that in this part, one of the frustrating things about being a social policy researcher is that how long it takes for new data to come out, and we really only have data on incomes in Edmonton, poverty rates in Edmonton through 2014. So this part of the presentation doesn't reflect the changes in our economy that I'll get into a bit later in the presentation. And then the green line shows the proportion of single adults living in poverty, and that's been more in the 25% to 20% range. And then the blue line looks at couple families along with their children living in poverty or low income. And that started out at about 10% and is still in the 6 to 7% range. And so couple families certainly have the lowest incidence of poverty, but there are couple families who do live in poverty in our community. This next chart looks at the poverty gap for low-income, lone-parent families in Metro Edmonton. Again, this is for the year 2014. And if you look at the left bar, it shows you a lone parent with one child, so it's a two-person household. And the poverty line for that household is $24,954 per year. And that's on an after-tax basis, but you also have to understand that also is after including all of the government income transfers for which they are eligible. So if they are receiving EI or social assistance or child benefits, that's actually included in this income concept called the after-tax low-income measure. And so the poverty line is $24,954, and but if you look at the actual median after-tax income, so that's the midpoint for all the people who are below the poverty line, the midpoint in terms of what they actually have as after-tax income is $12,520. So it's significantly below the poverty line. And then the orange part of the bar is what we call the poverty gap, how much on, in the median they are below the poverty line. And for the case of, the lone parent family with one child, the gap is $12,434 in 2014. If you look at a lone parent family, a lone parent with two children, the poverty line is $30,301, and the median after-tax income is $17,020, leaving a poverty gap of $13,281. So that's how much their incomes would have to go up in order for them to be at the poverty line. This next chart shows the same income concept for two-parent families. So again, these are only the two-parent families who are living in low income in our community. And again, for a two-parent family with one child, the poverty line is actually the same as a lone parent with two children, so that's $30,301. And the poverty gap is, for them, is $13,071. And for a two-parent family with two children, the poverty gap, additional income they would need to have in order to be at the poverty line is $13,288. So, I mean, really the takeaway there is that, most people in poverty have incomes well below these poverty lines. The other thing that's important to recognize is that overwhelmingly, regardless of family type, employment income is the biggest source of income for people. Now, this includes lone parents in Metro Edmonton, both low-income and non-low-income low parents. And if you add them together, 75.5% of their income came from employment. And only 14.5% came from government income transfers of all kinds. Including, child benefits, social assistance, EI payments, etc. The 10% it actually is other private income, so it could be interest income or investment income, or in the case of lone parent families, it might also include spousal or child, support payments from an ex-spouse. So again, the takeaway here being that, for lone parent families and for all family types, employment income is their biggest source of income. And that's why it's so important to look at trying to make work pay and raise those employment incomes. Now I'm getting into the ugly part of my presentation. And that has to do with much more recent data that we have in terms of how Edmonton's economy has changed as a result of the collapse in oil and natural gas prices. In the past couple of years. And so what this looks at is the number of individuals receiving employment insurance regular benefits in Metro Edmonton. And you can see it's gone up rather dramatically. In fact, in the first 7 months of 2017, we have almost 24,000 people in the Metro Edmonton area that are receiving employment insurance regular benefits, which is actually higher than it was, during the worst of the global financial crisis in 2009 and 2010. And I think this is a trend that you're going to see in pretty much all of the slides. This next slide looks at the average number of households receiving Alberta Works income support. And again, the 2016 number in the orange bar, in the rightmost bar, shows that for the first, this is the average from January to July. in terms of, and this is Alberta data. I don't have the Edmonton data for this, so this is the only slide that has Alberta data on it, but I don't anticipate that the Edmonton data would be all that different. But again, it's up significantly, starting in 2015 and certainly continuing on into 2016. And I think it would be reasonable to assume, unless there's a pretty quick economic turnaround, that this number is going to continue to grow. Part of the reason being that how income benefits work, like if you suffer an employment loss, you tend to go on EI first, and if the economy still isn't improving after that, you might have to go on Alberta Works. So I'm guessing that these numbers will continue to go up for a while before they start going down again. So again, shows real economic hardship in our community. And this is the number of individuals served by the Edmonton Food Bank Hamper Program, which does a measurement every year in the month of March. And this is City of Edmonton data, and again, you can see in 2016, which is on the right column, the dramatic increase in the number of people, having to rely upon the food bank in order to ensure that they have some measure of food security for themselves and for their family. And even just in the last 2 years, the food bank use is an interesting one because it is a pretty good barometer of hardship in the community. If you look at how it tracks over the years, again, you can see in the global financial crisis, it kind of spiked and it's certainly on its way up again as a result of the tough economy in which we find ourselves. The last chart that I want to look at in sort of this phase of the presentation is just what's happening with rents and vacancy rates in Metro Edmonton. Unfortunately, there is no CMHC data for 2016. The most recent data we have is for the month of October in 2015, and that's on the right column. And the orange bar, the blue bars kind of show average market rent. And you can see that despite the fact, and the vacancy rate is shown by the orange line. And despite the fact that the vacancy rate in October 2015 was up significantly to 4.2%, the rents actually were still up on a year-over-year basis from 2014 to 2015, which probably reflects the fact that landlords are probably just reluctant to drop rents. Now, it'll be interesting to see when we get the October 2016 rental market report, whether that has, I suspect the vacancy rate will be up even more, and it'll be interesting to see if rents perhaps are down a bit on a year-over-year basis. Again, the takeaway being that, despite, even if you suffer a loss of income, you don't necessarily get that big a break in terms of what you have to pay for your accommodation. And that's also another, I guess, depressing number, is that the wait lists for affordable housing at Capital Region Housing have spiked dramatically, which seems a bit counterintuitive when you see that there's more availability in the rental market. But a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's many more people who now qualify, for rental assistance, and so the wait lists have actually grown, and it's a big challenge in our community. Now I want to get into the good news in the publication, and that has to do certainly in terms of families with children. There have been actually there's good news from both the federal and provincial governments, and so what this shows is that on an annual basis, the additional annual benefits that families are going to receive combined from the new Alberta Child Benefit and the rejigged Canada Child Benefit. The Alberta government seems to have adopted green as its color, so I kind of put the Alberta Child Benefit in green for a family of two, and then the reworking of the new Canada Child Benefit that replaced the previous child benefits regime under the Conservatives. And these are increases that people are getting compared to the year before. And so you can see that they're very significant. For the lowest income family, it's almost $3,500 more that they're going to be getting per year as a result of the new Alberta Child Benefit and the new Canada Child Benefit. And the Alberta Child Benefit does phase out more quickly. It phases out completely at $41,220 of income, so it's very much tailored to the lowest income families. Whereas the Canada Child Benefit, actually, you'll still receive some benefit with 2 children, all the way up to $157,000 in net family income. So these are significant poverty game changers that, all of the things being equal, would have reduced child poverty in this province quite significantly. There's estimates that, you know, perhaps a third to even 40% reduction in in child poverty reduction in this province as a result of these new benefits. Now, we know that things aren't always equal, and the tough economy might offset some of the benefit being received here, but it's still going to be significant. I mean, they're 2 of the most significant, social policy innovations that we've seen in Canada for many, many years, and are going to benefit, even in Alberta, hundreds of thousands of families with children. So it's significant. I also wanted to talk briefly about you probably have heard about the carbon tax, but something that is not as well understood is the fact that the carbon tax, there's going to be a rebate provided not only to the lowest income families, but into, certainly to middle income families as well. And what this chart shows is once fully implemented, it's being phased in over 2 years. It shows what the rebates will be for a couple with 2 children in the orange. They'll receive about $550 in rebates, and for a couple family without children, about $450, and even a single adult will receive a $300 rebate. And you will receive this rebate regardless of whether you pay any income tax or not. Everyone will get it, similar to child benefits. It's a refundable benefit, and it's true that you will be paying more for your gasoline. I believe it's I have it down here. Trying to remember my numbers here, how much it is per gallon of gasoline. 6.73 cents per liter more for gasoline once fully implemented, and $1.52 per gigajoule more for home heating for natural gas. So everybody will pay that, but the lowest income people and middle income people, really up to a fairly significant level of income, for a couple with 2 children, over 100, about 110,000 before it's phased out. And so, I mean, the whole idea of this is that if you economize, like if you decide, okay, I'm going to give up a car, or if you don't have a car in the first place because you're low income, you're still going to get, the benefit even if you consume little or no gasoline. And if you, make energy efficiency improvements in your house, you will pay a little bit more extra for the natural gas, but receive, a rebate on your as an alternative. So we've been doing some preliminary number crunching on this, and we're fairly confident that most low-income households will actually come out ahead as a result of the carbon levies. That's a little less true as your income goes up, but if you're looking at it through a poverty lens, it actually will likely put a few more dollars into the pockets of most families. Now, I also wanted to talk a little bit about some of the key investments that have been made in Alberta in poverty reduction, and considering the financial situation of the province and the collapse in energy revenues, there's actually a lot of good news here. The Alberta Child Benefit I already mentioned. The additional costs to the province for this benefit will be around $200 million per year, including $147 million for the first 9 months, because it started on July the 1st. So it's a significant additional investment. There's also, I mentioned, the longer wait list for affordable housing. There's been a significant additional investment in affordable housing as well. The province is still sort of consulting about, some projects have been announced and they're still consulting about how to, best invest those dollars. 233 million were allocated for this fiscal year from April 1st to March 31st next year. There was a $25 million increase. That was a 24% increase in FCSS funding, that's Family and Community Support Services funding for preventative social services, and this took place after a 5-year freeze. There was a 44% increase, $15 million increase in women's shelter funding. Some of that was really overdue, but it did take place. There was also a 3-year commitment announced to fund municipal low-income transit passes. I'll get back to that in a minute. And there was a 2-year post-secondary tuition freeze that carries on for, it was last year and this coming academic year. And you may have read something about this somewhere, but there's also a phased minimum wage increase to $15 by October 1st, 2018, including a $1 increase to $12.20 per hour on October the 1st, which is this Saturday. And again, this is one of those measures to try to make sure that the minimum wage is closer to a living wage. And that people who are working full-time for the full year don't end up living in poverty. Despite these new investments, Alberta continues to have a significant tax advantage over any other Canadian province. What this shows is if other provinces, or if Alberta had the same tax rates as other provinces, like the same tax rates as Saskatchewan, we would generate another $7.5 billion in revenue. So we still have by far, even with all these measures that have been introduced, we have by far the lowest taxes in the country in Alberta. In BC's case, it would be, we generate $8.9 billion and all the way up to, if we had the same tax rates as Quebec, Alberta could generate $19.4 billion additional dollars. This is in 2016 dollars. The green bar is the sales tax component of that, and because we don't have a general sales tax, that does tend to be the single biggest differential with other provinces. But other provinces still have higher income taxes than us and higher user fees in some cases, like BC and Ontario have healthcare premiums, which we no longer have in Alberta. So we do, I guess the argument I would make is we need to make these investments, and we do need to continue to invest in the lowest income Albertans and Edmontonians. Also wanted to talk briefly about where the City of Edmonton can show leadership. Now the city has committed to introducing no later than September 1st next year a low-income transit pass at a 60% discount to the regular adult fare for all low-income Edmontonians, regardless of source of income. So if they're also working poor Edmontonians and they have an income under, the poverty line, they also would qualify for a 60% discount. The city is doing some consulting with our organization and others about how to, maybe have more of a phased approach, so that if you live, if you are in sort of deep poverty, you might get a bigger discount than you would if you were perhaps near the poverty line. So they're still working out the details of that. The other thing that the city can really do is secure a land supply for affordable housing. And we need to require developers to reserve land for non-market housing, in all new neighborhoods. We also have to follow through on a plan to build a diverse range of affordable seniors housing and other types of housing on surplus school sites. These are sites in established neighborhoods where we're never going to see schools built because families are smaller, and we need to make sure that some of those sites are set aside for seniors housing, affordable housing of all kinds, and also for permanent supportive housing for people who need on-site supports. And then this is something that is part of the End Poverty Edmonton initiative, but still needs to be followed through on. Implement a living wage for city contracted services. And a living wage ensures that a person working full-time for the full year does not live in poverty, and that would require an hourly wage of $16.69. That's in 2016 dollars without benefits. And this is based on living costs in Edmonton in the year 2016. So we still have quite a differential. $12.20 is our minimum wage, $16.69 is the living wage in order for that minimum wage to get up to being more of a living wage. But it is something that the city committed to but I'm sure there's going to be pushback, and they're going to have to be convinced to follow through on some of these recommendations, including the living wage recommendation. Oops. So that's pretty much the end of my formal presentation. I hope it's given you some new information in terms of things that are happening in our community that affect low-income Edmontonians. We have a lot more information on our website, and of course these days you have to be on social media, so you can also access our Twitter, our Facebook, our Instagram, YouTube. We are kind of trying to do it all. So anyway, thank you for your attentiveness, and thanks again to Project Plowshares and to Paula for inviting me to speak to you this evening.